What would you do if the person who broke your husband's heart as a child showed up at your door, begging for forgiveness? I never thought I'd have to answer that question until the day Eleanor knocked. Her frail frame trembled in the porch light, her eyes sunken with regret. My husband, Daniel, stood behind me, his silence heavier than the rain pounding the roof. 25 years ago, she left him her own son in a foster home and vanished. Now she was back, claiming she'd changed. I wasn't buying it. I'm Sarah, and I've spent the last decade building a life with Daniel, a man who carries his past like a shadow. He's kind, steady, the kind of person who fixes things broken chairs, broken hearts. But his childhood? That's a wound he doesn't touch. He was 7 when Eleanor abandoned him. No note, no explanation, just a social worker pulling him from the only home he'd known. He bounced through foster care, piecing himself together with grit and quiet determination. When we met, I saw the cracks, but loved him for how he'd mended them. We built a family, 2 kids, a dog, a small house with a garden. He tends like it's his therapy. Life was good. Until her. Eleanor's reappearance wasn't a surprise to Daniel. He'd known she was alive, tracked her down once in his 20s out of curiosity. She'd been living a few towns over, remarried, no kids, no contact. He didn't want her in his life then, and he didn't now. But I could see the flicker in his eyes when she stood there, clutching a worn photo of him as a boy. It wasn't lovey, it was pain, raw and unhealed. I wanted to slam the door, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way her hands shook, or the desperation in her voice when she said, "I just need to explain." Against my better judgment, I let her in. Daniel sat across from her, arms crossed, his jaw tight. The kids were upstairs, oblivious, and I stood by the kitchen counter, watching like a hawk. Eleanor's story spilled out in fragments. She'd been young, barely 20, trapped in an abusive marriage with Daniel's father. Leaving was her only way out, she said, but she couldn't take a child. She'd planned to come back, but life, poverty, shame, addiction kept her away. She'd sobered up years ago, found stability, and now, facing a terminal illness, she wanted to make things right. Her words hung in the air, heavy with regret, but light on accountability. I felt Daniel tense beside me. "You didn't even call," he said, his voice low, like a storm brewing. I wanted to scream at her, to demand why she thought she deserved a second chance after leaving a child to fend for himself. But then came the twist I didn't see coming. Eleanor reached into her bag and pulled out a stack of letters, yellowed and unopened, addressed to Daniel. "I wrote you," she whispered. "Every year. They were returned. Your foster parents said you didn't want them." Daniel's face froze. He'd never been told about letters. For years, he believed she'd forgotten him entirely. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. I saw the boy in him, the one who'd waited for a mother who never came, now grappling with the idea that she'd tried. But the letters changed nothing for me. They were too late, too convenient. I excused myself to check on the kids, needing a moment to breathe. That's when I met Clara, our neighbor, at the back door. She'd seen Eleanor's car and had come to check on us. Clara was a retired social worker, the kind of person who radiated warmth but took no nonsense. Over coffee, I spilled everything. Clara listened, then said something that flipped my perspective. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about them. It's about freeing yourself from their weight. She'd seen cases like Daniel's kids abandoned, parents returning decades later. She didn't defend Eleanor, but suggested Daniel might need closure, not for her sake, but for his own. Clara's words stuck with me as I returned to the living room. Eleanor was still talking, her voice softer now, recounting small memories of Daniel as a toddler, how he loved trains, how he'd sleep with a stuffed bear. Daniel's eyes glistened, but he didn't speak. I sat beside him, my hand on his, feeling the war inside him. I wanted to protect him, to shield our family from this woman who'd caused so much pain. But Clara's words echoed. What did Daniel need? Not what Eleanor wanted, but what he needed to heal. The next day, Daniel decided to read the letters. We sat in our garden, the kids playing in the distance as he opened each one. Some were apologies, others stories of her life, her struggles. They didn't excuse her absence, but they painted a picture of a broken woman who'd never stopped thinking of her son. One letter mentioned a train set she'd bought him, left behind when she fled. Daniel's voice cracked as he read. It still had that train set, stored in our attic, a relic of a life he barely remembered. Over the next week, Daniel wrestled with what to do. I stayed out of it, letting him lead. He didn't owe Eleanor anything, but he deserved peace. One evening, he asked to meet her again. This time, it was just the two of them at a coffee shop. When he came home, he looked lighter, not happy, but unburdened. He told me he'd listened, asked questions, and set boundaries. Eleanor could write to him, but she wouldn't be part of our family. He didn't forgive her, not fully, but he let go of the anger that had chained him for years. Eleanor respected his terms. She wrote occasionally short letters about her life, never pushing for more. When she passed away 6 months later, Daniel didn't cry, but he kept her last letter tucked away with the others. I realized then that Clara was right. Forgiveness, or even just letting go, wasn't about Eleanor. It was about Daniel reclaiming his story. As for me, I learned something too. I wanted to protect my husband by shutting Eleanor out, but love isn't just about shielding someone from pain. It's about standing beside them as they face it. Our life went on messy, beautiful hours. The kids still played in the garden, the dog still chewed Daniel's shoes, and he still fixed things one day at a time. But now, he carried a little less of that shadow, and I loved him even more for it.